Well, welcome back to Contrastly. My name's Simon Plant, and today I thought we'd do a quick 10-minute retouch on an aerial photograph. So I've been producing videos for Contrastly now for a couple of years, and I thought it'd be quite nice to kind of put some of those tutorials that we've done into like a real world scenario. So I've just recently got my commercial drone license, and I'm just starting to do some aerial photography and some video as well. And I thought just for fun it'd be nice to just process this one from start to finish in a very brief space of time, as you would do if you're on a commercial job. So we're in Lightroom to start with, and the DJI Phantom 4 Pro which I use shoots raw files in a DNG format, so that's what we're going to be processing. So first thing I'm going to do is go down to lens corrections and tick these boxes. I've got the lens profile selected for the Phantom 4, so that's all good. Effects, sometimes I'll put the post-crop vignetting on the images, either if I'm just staying in Lightroom, I'll do it here. If I'm going to Photoshop, I tend to leave it off and maybe output it with a bit of a vignette. So we'll leave that one off for now. Calibration is a bit limited on this. As I said, it's got an embedded color profile there, so we're not going to be touching that any. So we're going to go to the basic tab. I normally start off when I import the pictures and it's set to auto. That basically sets your black and white point. You can tell that by clicking these little triangles in the histogram. You can see we've got a white point there. We're starting to clip, and the black point on these cows down the bottom. So that's a good starting point. You can then obviously have a play around if you want to bring the shadows up a little bit, or the whites. You can do that. I often hold down the Alt or Option key while I'm doing that, and that again shows if we're going too far what's clipping. So we'll pull that back a little bit, and then highlights the same thing. You can obviously adjust those. So I'm going to bring those down a little bit because the sky's a little bit weak on this image, but we could, if we wish, and we'll do this, is add a gradient onto the picture like so. And again, I can bring down the highlights there just to avoid too much clipping, and add a bit more definition to the sky area like so. Don't go too far. At this point, if you wanted to soften the sky a little bit, you could obviously have a play around with the clarity slider there. That can soften or even add a little bit of mid-tone contrast there. Well, I'm actually going to pump it up a little bit, again just help define the sky a little bit more. So that's all I'm going to do for now on there. It still looks a little bit flat to me, so I'm just going to either move the contrast slider up a little bit. Maybe I can bring down the blacks a bit more and bring up the whites a little bit like so. That's not too bad. We can always enhance this a bit further. Once I've done and I'm happy with that, I can also adjust the vibrance a little bit. And I think because we're going to Photoshop, we'll do the rest of our color adjustments in there. I will change the color balance just a little bit and just warm it up a tad like so. That's all looking good. Once I'm happy, I will find my Lightroom. I will right click on the image and go to edit in, and then either edit in Photoshop or open as a smart object. I'm going to open this as a smart object. Doesn't make a lot of odds, but if I want to sort of refine anything on the raw file, I can do that a bit easier if it's a smart object within Photoshop. So my image is now open in Photoshop. You can see it is actually a smart object. You can double click on that and it brings up the raw file again, which is quite useful. The only thing really I'm going to do with this, I mentioned retouching earlier. It's not really a retouch. It's more of a kind of a processing. We're not actually going to clone or move anything around this image. I'm just trying to accentuate certain elements of this frame. Now, obviously what we want to do is decide what's the most important element in this image, and I think it's going to be this walkway and the rivers going through the picture way off into the distance. We have got some nice yellow fields there which add a splash of colour. We may highlight those as well, but it still looks a little bit flat to me at the moment. So first thing I'm going to do is make it a curves adjustment layer. Okay, I'm going to bring make a bit of a nice S curve, just to add a bit of contrast. I'm just going to pin it down towards the bottom, like so, and just raise it there. Something like that. There's before, there's after, and already it's made quite a big difference. Just add a bit more sparkle, a bit more punch to the picture. If we don't want to obviously affect the sky, which was quite bright anyway, we can get our gradient tool, foreground to transparent, and I want black in the foreground, and I can just hold down the shift key, just drag down there, and that will take the effect away from the sky area. If I Alt or Option click on the mask, you can see that there. I can actually do that again a little bit, bring it down a bit further this time, like so. Before, after. So we've still got a nice bit of sparkle in the foreground, but it's not affecting the sky. Next thing I want to do is add a little bit more punch to the colours. I'm going to get to hue saturation adjustment layer, and let's see if I can just move this across a little bit so we can see what we're doing. And what I want to do here is really just isolate the greens a little bit. So let's go on to greens, like so. Or yellows will probably do the same thing. They're very close on this picture. We can use the eyedrop tool as well, just to click on there, and that will give us a nice range here. And we can adjust these if we want to add a little bit more colour than perhaps we've selected. We can drag these out a little bit further, and it will affect a little bit more of the colours in the image. I will do that just slightly because I think it's going to help in this particular image. And now we're going to play around with the hue. We can either go a bit greener or a bit more yellow. I think I want to go a little bit more greener there, but not much, and bring the saturation up a little bit. Okay, and then close that down. So there's before, there's after. It's subtle, but it just adds a bit more lushness to the greens, but it's not too over the top. I can drag that actually under my curves adjustment there. So there's before, there's after. If you wanted to bring back some of the yellow in the areas, let's say down the front here, perhaps it's gone a bit too like limey green. Get the brush tool with black in the foreground. I'm going to drop my flow down, maybe to about 8%, and then with the brush tool, I can just paint the effect away from some of that area, like so. Okay, same with the blues. Just double click on this again. Let's try and affect the blues now. Again, I'll use the eyedropper tool just to select that a bit more. And I'm just going to pump up the saturation of the blues a little bit. Change the hue slightly. Make it a little bit more cyan, like so. Before, after, if you just watch the water, that's just pump those up a little bit. Okay, again, if it's affecting an area you're not too sure about, you can always alter that by now my favourite bit of processing these sort of images is to do the dodge and burning to accentuate certain areas with either lightening or darkening. And there's several ways you can do this. Curves is most definitely the easiest. I'm going to make a curves adjustment layer. I'm just going to lighten the curve slightly here. I'm going to fill this layer with black. That takes away the effect. If I can get it, there we go. So now the effect is off. I'm going to call this one dodge. Okay, I'm going to duplicate that layer. Command or Control J. I'm going to call this one burn. Okay, and then I'm going to double click and just darken that layer. So now you've got two layers, one darkening, one lightening, which are both hidden. Now we can change the luminosity of these to blending mode of these to luminosity. That means most of the time it won't affect the color, just affect the luminosity values when we enable them. So Okay, so that was fun. We had a bit of a crash in Photoshop, which is not done for a long, long time. So I don't know what caused that. So I've had to redo the whole image because unfortunately the autosave for some reason didn't save it. So there's a lesson: always save your work periodically. So anyway, so we're on the burn layer now. So I've selected that. We're going to get a brush tool here. Make sure we've got white in the foreground. I'm going to bring my flow up to about 6%, 6 to 9%, somewhere around there, quite low. Make sure my brush is lower. So let's have a little think again. We just want to add some highlights, darken, sorry, we're going to burn this. We're just going to burn some of the areas we're not particularly that interested in when our viewers' eyes go in. So maybe down here would be good. We're not too worried about that. And around the outside here, not too worried about that. And the outer edges, which actually once we put a vignette on will obviously darken down anyway, but we're going to do a little bit here there. Before after, so it doesn't look like we're doing much when we're doing this, but actually we are creating quite an effect, impact on the image. So we're just going to go around the image in bits, just go to the places where we're not particularly worried of where the viewer's eyes are going to go wandering. We're then going to switch to the dodge layer and do the same thing, but this time it's going to accentuate certain areas. So I'm going to just drop down my flow a little bit more. Obviously this area is probably the area where I want the most detail. I want the viewer's eye to run through the image and out the back here, maybe as far as the background, those fields there. A few highlights on the water. Before, after, so it is having an effect. And we can build this up, obviously, a bit more slowly than I'm doing. And remember, the viewer's eye is going to be attracted to areas of brightness and highest contrast, so and certain, obviously, color saturation. So always remember that when you're working on the image, if you start to work on a highlight right here, it may well distract your viewer's eye off to that direction. Unless you've got a reason for that, you don't particularly want to do it. And a few little highlights over here on the tree. Okay, so let me just have a quick look again. There's before, there's after. So we're slowly building that up. And same with the burn layer. And of course, the great thing about the curves is that we can come in and darken that even further if we want to accentuate the effect if we wish to. And the same with the highlights. Maybe just make that pop a little bit more, but not too much. Like so. So there's another little bit done. So I've added the layers into a couple of little groups so that we can turn these on and off and see where we've come from. So there's before and there's after. So we've added a little bit of visual weight to the picture in certain areas, very, very quickly, albeit. I mean, you can spend a bit more time than I have doing this, and just sort of adjusted some of the colours as well. The final thing I'm going to do, you'll notice in the landscape here, the sunlight is breaking through the clouds in this part of the image, and the river is kind of winding towards that area. So I'm going to do one last thing here. It's a bit more of a kind of effect rather than just pure adjustment. I'm going to add a curves. I'm going to just lighten that curve. I'm going to go to the red channel and add some red to that, and then the blue channel and drag that down, add some yellow. So I'm adding some warmth to the picture. I'm going to fill that layer, just with black, so it takes the effect away. Add a gradient again, a radial gradient this time, and I want to go from white from white to transparent. Sorry, get my words out. So it's going to be highlighted around this area here, and I'm just going to drag it out like so. And you can see now we've got this like slightly flared look but with colour, and that really adds a little bit of impact and draws the viewer's attention down to that area. Now if you think it's a bit too much, we can always drag the opacity down a little bit. I quite like it. I think it just adds a little bit of atmosphere to the picture, and as I said, anything with strong color or brightness is really going to attract your viewers' attention. So you've got to be very careful. If I had to place this out of frame over here, it's going to have the opposite effect that we want. We want to try and direct the viewer's attention through the image. So there we go. This is where we've come from again. And this is where we've ended up. So not a huge transformation, but it's just really just polished it up a little bit and added a little bit more finesse to the picture, albeit very, very quickly. Probably take a little bit more time over it if I was doing this, obviously, for a client. But for the video, obviously, I wanted to keep you engaged as much as possible. So there you go. There's some of the techniques that we've learned over the very many videos that we've done. And I thought, like I said, we'd do the aerial picture just for something a bit different. So I'm hoping to do a bit more aerial work. And as I learn more techniques with that, I may even do some HDR aerial work and some panoramics and give that a go. But we'll see what transpires. Thanks for watching. Catch you on the next video.